Welcome to Eastside Group's podcast, where each week Pastor Chad Mann and Emily Watson will chat about the need for discipleship, what it is, and how we as believers and as a church are working towards being disciples who make disciples. If you're new to our podcast, Eastside is a church who exists to transform Fort Smith and beyond. Our purpose here at Eastside is to gather, grow, and go. Learn more about us at myeastside.tv. Let's get started.
Back at the Eastside Group's podcast. Hey, Chad.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, PR.
Hey, what's going on?
So glad that you're with us today.
PR in the house.
PR's in the house. We've been laughing.
He's tickled
We've been
to be
having
with
a good
us today.
time.
So just so everybody knows, we have a lot of fun here.
We do.
Everything leading up to this has been so much fun.
We're about 10 minutes into this, and we've just been cracking ourselves up.
You're just now seeing the first 30 seconds of it.
That's true. And Aaron's
we'll release a behind-the-scenes cut.
Yeah.
You know?
Podcast bloopers.
You remember those, like
something.
watching Smokey and the Bandit growing up, movies like that? And then at the end of the movie, they'd show all the deleted scenes where they were laughing.
Oh, that's the best.
You're like Burt Reynolds. You're like the
you.
Burt Reynolds of this podcast. And I'm the Dom DeLuise, the big round guy.
And we're glad to have you on here.
Hey,
what is Emily?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
You got to be careful.
I know.
Yeah, you do.
I know. Yeah. Well, so today we're talking about the church in 2020. And the last time you were with us, we were talking about kind of how we get by this year through this pandemic and the church's role through this pandemic. And now we're focusing more on what we're at the end of the year, which is crazy to be at the end of the year.
Yeah, when was that? You were on this podcast and we were talking about that.
I think it would have been late summer, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're talking about the church in 2020, kind of where we've come from, and, what do we do now?
Yeah. And so, we had a series of questions written out here like, hey, we want to get your thoughts on some things. And we know that this year, at the beginning of the year, you were on sabbatical, about ready to hit sabbatical, or in the first 2 weeks of it when the pandemic came about. So the way in which when you left to go on sabbatical and then you come back is night and day, like approach and thinking. And how shocking was that for you? Because I don't think I really ever asked that, because I think we were all disoriented as a staff going, I don't know what we're doing.
Right.
We're trying to do this the best way we know. But to think about your situation where, you and Cindy were away and you were trying to focus on refreshment and just getting some rest and refocusing together. And then you come back and it's like, man, this is just, we're not meeting. At that time, we were not meeting on campus in person. So, what are some things, I guess, that you experienced? What have you learned through 2020?
Wow, that's a good question. Going back to that, when we went on sabbatical, and I'll just be honest and kind of lay it all out there, reflecting back on that, one of the things I learned is that I wish I wouldn't have called it a sabbatical. Because obviously we went through a season of loss with Ricky and the suicide and all that. And so in that moment of getting away, it was more a leave of absence.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because when I do think of a sabbatical, I think you're going away to truly renew and refresh.
Yeah.
And get vision and, be ready to come back and, hey, this is what I think God is calling us to do, kind of thing. In that moment, though, it was more of like a leave of absence because we were in a crisis mode.
Yeah.
Personally, and it was almost like if we weren't able to get away, I don't know if I would have survived.
Sure.
And I'm just putting it out there. So I wish I wouldn't have called it a sabbatical because it wasn't. It wasn't a sabbatical. It was a leave of absence of just trying to keep everything together.
Sure.
And we received counseling. Yeah. And that wasn't marital counseling. Our marriage is strong and all, but over the situation, and not just that situation, but over the last few years of just loss after loss after loss. So I want to clarify that. I think that's important to note. And then, while we're gone on that leave of absence, the pandemic hit. And so things changed for us. And then obviously here back home, the church, things are changing. And you guys, I think, did a great job and just like doing the best you knew how to do and not wanting to bother me, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was crazy, and obviously there was a time where I needed to be brought into some things and, because of the pandemic and so forth. So, and then coming back, I was just like, this is crazy. Yeah. And every pastor felt that way.
Agreed.
Everybody,
every
pastor, every staff person.
They're lying.
Right.
If they say, this is, I got this.
And in those moments, we probably thought this is a short-term thing, a very short-term thing. So we'll get through it, and then we'll get back to where we were and carry on.
Yeah, because I remember we were having thoughts on, after summer, when the fall kickoff, we were talking about those things.
And then came the fall, and then we're talking, there is going to be
kids going to be in school for more than a week.
Right, and a second surge, which is happening, and, and trying to figure all that out. But I think one of the things that we learned is that creativity is of utmost importance.
Yeah.
And so I think of Aaron, that where we had to go strictly on online and how he took that for, our online presence from down here to up here.
Yeah.
And so, and how critical that was, essential that was. And so I think creativity kind of spoke into that, and especially his creativity. I think the rest of us were just trying to figure out, how do we best minister to our people and meet needs and reach out, and because no one's connecting, so how do we as a staff connect? And so there are churches that have closed their doors in the pandemic. There are churches that have just said we're not meeting until 2021. And
large churches.
And finding that balance, trying to find that balance of, okay, the government is saying this, our governor is saying this, and God's word is saying this, and trying to find, like Jesus said, hey, give to Caesar what is Caesar's,
and Romans
to God
13,
what
there's
is
governing
God.
authorities. What is right?
Yeah, so I think trying to find that balance, and that's been a challenge. I mean, it's been a challenge for me of personal freedom and responsibility versus just, I think one of the other things I've learned, maybe we have learned, and I want to be careful saying this as far as the intent of it, but I think I've learned that we're possibly more like sheeple than people.
Sheeple.
I've never heard that. We're not peesh.
What? Peesh.
Peep.
Or peep.
We're sheeple.
I got sheep backwards.
Well, sheeple as in the sense of we're just willing to follow right along with whatever is told to us, right? And like I said, I want to be careful with this because you're talking about a pandemic, you're talking about a serious virus, and I'm in no way saying that people don't need to be careful, because they do, we do, definitely need that. But it's almost like, hey, whatever Big Brother says, we're just going to do.
Yeah.
And I think there's been people that have done that. And I'm not talking about people of Eastside or whatever. I'm talking about overall, and even in the Big C church, we're just kind of willing to just follow and do whatever. I mean, I think of John MacArthur and his church out in California. He said, no, we're meeting together. You will not tell us. That is a violation, and that whole thing. So,
Yeah, I stood his ground, and there was a lot of people who showed up at that service at first, after that proclamation by the governor and whomever. I mean, it was packed out, and I remember seeing the screenshot or photos. People took pictures while they were in the service that day, and it was packed. And I can remember even wrestling with man, are they supposed to be doing that? You know? I struggle with that.
I know.
And I
do too.
I'm really more of the guy who's get together, man. I mean, so it is hard. There's that tension, like you just said.
the tension of being a people versus a sheeple,
Right.
and not being led to the slaughter, kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
So yeah, it has been a.
So that's got to be hard on a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what most people don't understand. Well, I shouldn't say that. I want to be fair. I think there's probably a lot of people
Yeah.
that don't understand. These are hard decisions that you're having to make, that pastors are having to make. This is not easy. You've got one crowd that's saying we shouldn't be doing this, and you have the other crowd saying, why aren't we doing this?
Right.
And
Right.
it's really hard.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
There are those that don't come because of certain restrictions. I mean, I think we've done a really good job of the church, handling the pandemic as a church, and Matt and Bob and Seaburn, and trying to put together a real safe plan for us, and totally appreciate that, respect that, and so I think we've done a good job in that. But some people don't come because of certain restrictions,
Yeah.
right? Or if you don't have any restrictions, then people won't feel comfortable with
Either way.
coming. So
Yeah.
either way, right, you're
Yeah.
kind of...
And that can be a really discouraging thing for pastors, and I think just even the church in general. And so can y'all think of other areas as pastors how this pandemic can be really discouraging in the church?
Well, I think it speaks to the realness of the discouragement among pastors. I mean, I read an article not that long ago, and statistics, and you know how statistics go, right? I mean, we had an election based on polling numbers and so forth, so we know how that goes. But it was talking about, like, just a few months ago, or basically when the pandemic, shortly after the pandemic hit, 30% of pastors were like considering quitting. And then now, just the recent number has jumped up to 70%.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember where I read that, and I don't want to say it out loud and not be for sure, but
Right.
it stuck out to me.
That's just incredible.
Yeah, that there's a lot of discouragement in the pastor world, and I think it's I think it could be feelings of fear, one, inadequacy. How do we do this? I don't know what to do. How do I lead this church? And people are so disconnected.
Yeah.
I mean, so and the congregation, they're discouraged, because they're not able to meet together, and this virus has kept everybody away, and the powers that be and whatever, is just it's been a challenge. Yeah. And so I think Go ahead.
Buildings and budgets and butts, right? That's what we said in the past.
That's good. I haven't heard that one.
When you're trying to measure success in ministry or as a pastor, man, are we building buildings? Are we filling up our buildings? Are our budgets, are they increasing, for missions and ministries? And how many rear ends do we have in the seat? And so when you're not using buildings like you were, your budgets are beginning to look or shift or begin to deplete in some areas. And the rear ends aren't in the seats anymore like they were. Yeah, a guy could get real discouraged real fast because everything they've learned, everything they've been trained to do, in ministry as a pastor, and you're like, I can't measure or gauge success now.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think there's a fear, there's inadequacy, there's the fear of inadequacy.
Right.
Of like, I'm failing. I don't know how to do this.
Right.
I better go and sell insurance. And that's not a knock to anybody selling insurance. But you know what I'm saying? I got to go do something else because I don't know how to do this now. And I think probably one of the things that I've had to remind myself of, because, I got to, part of what I do is thinking about how many people are filling up the classrooms for Sunday school, connect groups, small groups, and meeting in homes, and what the curriculum they have and what they're using, and the missions teams that we're sending here and there. And so when borders get closed, or people just go, I'm not going anywhere right now. I've had to go, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. Yeah. What do we do now? And I think what I've just constantly, and I've been reading a lot more on leadership in the last couple of months, because I just feel like that's what God wants me to grow in, is my understanding of leadership. And one thing I've been hit with is this book, Lead, by Paul David Tripp, and then some other guys who've talked about leading as shepherding, And so I've been reminded in the last couple of months man, there's a lot of things that you and I and our other pastors, no matter what ministry oversight they're providing, the metrics for success have been yanked out from underneath them. So all they have to go to or go on is, am I shepherding people?
Right.
Bottom line, and what does that look like?
Yeah, because we can't see it very clear.
I know, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like what I just read it today, that the belief is that 20% of attenders, people that were attending pre-pandemic, will not come back.
How many?
20%.
20%.
I can see that. Because
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people are out of the habit, and we're also in this, what you've talked about, this sifting of the people who are committed to be here, to be a part of the church, and then those who have fallen off.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because you don't see what you used to see. And it's kind of like, okay, are people connecting, do they still call Eastside their church home? I mean, I know our viewership online, is still strong, and a lot of people are committed to Eastside, and they're watching online right now because they're not comfortable yet coming back, and totally respect that and understand. But it's still hard because it's not real tangible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I think there has been a plague of discouragement among church staff and also congregation. I mean, I mean, in all of society, there's been discouragement, and it has impacted the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing is I was reading through a blog today of Kerry, I don't even know how to say his last name. You know how to say that guy's last name?
Newhoff, I believe.
Newhoff,
Yeah.
okay. I wish he'd just spell it like that. Because I see Kerry Newhoff. Anyway, he was talking about things that have been taken away and things that are still there. 7 things that are been yanked and 3 things that we still have. And I think one of them was hope. I think the second one he was talking about was hope. And I thought to myself, that is the thing that should be driving us as a church.
Yeah.
It's almost like, somebody asked me at lunch yesterday, do you think this is God's judgment? What's going on, with churches and and I said, no, I don't know if I'm ready to say that. I would say I feel like it's a pruning of the church.
A sifting, right?
Sifting and pruning to where it's almost like, we've said this before, almost like a reset button where the Lord was like, okay, all this stuff that's been going on, boom, taking it away. And we're going to hit this reset button here. And part of that is seeing who's going to be around to be in the game, so to speak.
Right.
I'm still here.
Right.
And I'm still
Right.
on mission.
Yeah.
This is about the Lord.
Who's in the game, who's on the team.
Yeah.
And that's still, we have a decent idea, but we don't have a real good idea of what that ultimately looks like. And I think it goes back as far as the discouragement to encouragement, of what we can be encouraged about, especially as we head in, because I don't want to be like doom and gloom here.
Right.
But I think we're just being honest. There's been discouragement. It's been a challenge. We haven't been, the tangibles aren't there, but we know God is still doing something. He's still working. We're still seeing, we're seeing some of it, and all. We just don't see it like we used to see it, and like you said, by the measurements that we used to go off of. But I think, so kind of shifting that from the discouragement to encouragement in 2021, I think just for Isaiah 43:19. I think this is it, all right, at least for me, and maybe it can be for you and those watching, but it says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" So I am doing a new thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the question is,
do you see it?
What is that new thing?
Your eyes open?
What does that look like,
Yeah.
And that goes back to you talking about hope, too, because, even though we've seen discouragement through the pandemic, the encouragement is that our mission does still stay the same.
Yeah.
But He's doing a new thing, because God is all about new things, new creations, new growth.
Yeah.
And so the mission's still the same, but what does that newness look like?
Yeah.
Thankfully, He's given us wisdom and creativity to get outside of the box and to reach people, because our purpose as individual believers and as a church still stays the same.
That's right.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Very
change.
well said.
Talk about missions and missionaries. You know, SBC commissioned 79 new missionaries within the last couple of weeks and have sent them out through IMB, International Mission Board. 79. In a time where we were going, man, they're coming home. Man, they're sending them back from Asia or wherever else. We start going, man, what's going on? And then yet, boom, flip the switch. A couple months later, we were commissioning 79, almost 80 new missionaries to go out. And those that were sent back or, sent away from their home mission field have been redirected, some of them going to new places. It's almost like, God's just doing some pretty cool things here. It's hard to explain. Sometimes like, do you see it, you know?
Yeah.
But I've been encouraged by these testimonies of what God's doing, because even with some of those that are still in certain areas of the world, they can't do what they were doing 8 months ago. There's been a social media push, or they're using technology even more than they were before to push the gospel and get it out there. And like, it's just amazing, because you're like, okay, the mission hasn't stopped.
That's right.
Hope is still there. God is using the internet, and social media. I've always been social media is the devil,
thing. He's doing a new thing.
Yeah, and he's using this to get the message out to people.
And may it be that that we're discovering, and we will discover in 2021 and maybe beyond, that the scattered church has more potential to make an impact than the gathered church.
Ooh, I like that.
That is good.
So
say that again.
It's
the scattered church has more potential to have
to make an
impact.
impact maybe than the gathered
Yeah.
church. Not minimizing the gathering.
No.
We
Right,
know
right,
the
right.
scripture,
No.
don't forsake it. We come
Right,
together,
right, right.
we worship, But as when it comes to reaching people and the gospel and ministering, is the scattered church going to be more impactful than the gathered church? And I would say yes, it will be. And so, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for Eastside? What would it mean for Eastside to be the scattered church?
Yeah.
So, and I don't have an answer to that yet.
Right, right.
So.
I think we've really got to work hard with our D groups and small groups, and those that are comfortable
that's good.
being together, and being better at what we should have been doing in the first place. I think I've tried through seasons and different movements, but going to our neighborhoods on our own, not coming to the campus and the building, but let's be intentional throughout the week with our brothers and sisters in Christ. I think in the past sometimes, see you next Sunday.
Yeah.
And really what it is see you Tuesday night, because we're having a cookout at my house and we're inviting all my lost neighbors over.
Sure.
And see, that's what I was just thinking, is that whenever people, like the average American churchgoer, comes to church and spiritual growth takes place in that 1 hour, once a month or twice a month.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that's taken away.
Yeah.
And you mean
Hey, we're not busy anymore.
Spiritual growth in my life has to look different now?
Yeah.
If I truly want that, then it has to look different?
Yeah.
Well, either I don't know how to do it, I don't know what to do, or I have to make an effort to stay connected and to be growing in a group or individually.
Yeah.
And see, and that's why then, so here's this thought that the scattered church is more impactful than the gathered church. And I don't know necessarily what that looks like, but that's why I have an awesome staff that assists me. Here you just heard what that could look like. So that's the beauty of this.
Yeah.
Here's my 30,000 foot view, and here's the 5,000 foot view.
Yeah.
So, and that's a beautiful thing. And so maybe
is.
those watching, would have some ideas on how the scattered church will be more impactful than the gathered church. But I would also say, and I know we need to wrap up, but I think the word that comes to my mind for 2021 also would be courage. I think courage is going to be a big deal, because I think the persecution of the church is going to increase.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have threats, and I mean that threats in more of a broad term
Sure.
than what we might think of when we hear threat. I think it's going to take a lot of courage because I think it's coming. It has been coming, and I think it's going to increase. And I think when you think of threats, I think of taxes even. I mean, think about it, and I don't mean to get political and all, but
churches losing their nonprofit.
taxes are going to have to be paid from somewhere with all the, I mean, we're in debt like crazy in the country. And I just think, and there's been attempts, and I just think it's coming, where, okay, churches would be a great target to increase some revenue.
Yeah.
And so I think that's in jeopardy, and so I think it's going to take a lot of courage for pastors and staff and congregations across America to really stand up and fight for what we truly believe in as Christians and as a church. So anyway.
It's good. It's a good word. Courage.
Courage, I like that.
Hope.
Courage and hope.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Courage, hope, scattered. Look out!
Look out, baby!
And then and then does the scattered church? Does that mean then the church doesn't need us?
Now we're going to cut that last segment out of our podcast.
Well,
and there's that insecurity, right, that comes in
is.
that a lot of pastors and staff have during this
Yeah.
time, and we could talk a lot about that. But
we'll
anyway.
have to continue this conversation.
Yeah,
another
it's
time.
been good.
It's been
For
really
sure.
good. Yeah. Thanks for being with us, PR.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes,
PR.
enjoyed it. Please
Yeah.
ask me back more.
We will.
Hey, you will.
What
be.
is it?
It'd be a
August,
trilogy.
September, October, November. It's
We'll
been
see you
like
next
5
year.
or 6 months. I mean, I can see I can see the how much of a difference I've made.
He's equipped the saints well.
Twice a year.
That's right. All right. Well, don't forget to make disciples.
Make disciples.
Who make disciples?
Who make disciples.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Eastside Group's podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you in the next one.